All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for our webinar today, Choosing UCaaS with Confidence, Guiding Tech Leaders to Strategic Purchasing. My name is Nellie Galindo, and I am a Solution Marketing Manager here at Bandwidth, and I'll be the host of our webinar today. Before we begin, I would like to start off with just a few housekeeping reminders. First is that we are going to keep all lines muted just to prevent any background noise that might occur. Also, please enter any questions you have in our Q&A box just to the right of your screen. We are going to reserve questions for the end of the webinar. We will have a Q&A session at the very end. And finally, you are going to receive a recording of the webinar today that's recorded over the next couple of days. So just be on the lookout, check your email for that information. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. So joining me today are two of my incredible and very knowledgeable peers. We have Lauren Brockman, our Senior Director of Product Management, and Bill Gentry, who is our Senior Director of Network Solutions Architecture. And today I'm going to be talking with Lauren and Bill about some of the ways that you as an IT and telephony leader can feel more confident when you are faced with choosing a unified communications provider for your organization. And so this is something that we here at Bandwidth have a lot of a wealth of knowledge in. Oh, I'm so sorry, I jumped ahead. But today we really just wanted to take that time to share with you some of the knowledge that we've gained over the years and to really support those of you who are looking at choosing a new or a different UCaaS provider. And so specifically, we're going to be talking about 6 key considerations for evaluating UCaaS platforms. We're also going to be talking about the benefits of going direct to carrier for your communications infrastructure. And then finally, we're going to cover some tips for navigating telecom requirements. And so the first thing that we do want to cover is that we just want to acknowledge choosing a new UCaaS platform can be an incredibly overwhelming process. We know that there are a lot of different elements to consider. And we also want to acknowledge that for many software purchases, these end up in buyer's remorse, up to 60%, according to a Gartner study. And another 29% of buyers ultimately end up just swapping to a different vendor for the very same solution. And so I want to pose a question to Lauren. So what have you seen when working with customers who are switching providers? Do you tend to see the same trends? And if so, how could they be avoided?
Yeah, so when I saw this statistic, I was actually a little bit surprised, to be honest with you, because we typically see people when they've made the decision about where they're going, and then we get involved with them very early on in the migration journey. That said, I mean, really, what is buyer's remorse? It's when your expectations for how something's going to be are different from the reality that you're experiencing. So I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is what are the things to think about? What are the considerations to think about to make sure that you don't fall into this bucket? I was also thinking about a couple of trends as I looked at this slide that I thought were interesting. First of all, most enterprises actually don't have one. So they may be moving between them, but they also end up having multiple of these platforms live at the same time. So one of the really important things to consider is if you might have buyer's remorse, or if you're going to be doing more than one, you need to be able to change them relatively painlessly. And we have seen a lot of energy and a lot of focus in the past couple of years on how do we make that migration journey easier between platforms. And I think that that's something really important to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lauren. So as we begin to look at UCaaS specifically, these are 6 areas of consideration that, again, we in our expertise believe to be the elements that are going to afford enterprise organizations the ability to strive for a high level value fit. And again, we don't want you to fall into the bucket of organizations that do have that buyer's remorse. We really believe that understanding and considering these 6 areas is going to give you the most confidence as you walk into your buying journey for a UCaaS system. And so for this webinar, we're going to go in depth into each of these 6 areas. So the first area of consideration is flexibility and scalability. And I will say, I do think that these terms get thrown around a lot. So, Bill, I want to ask you, can you speak specifically to what you think IT leaders need to consider when we say they need to keep flexibility and scalability in mind?
Sure. I mean, the reality that we're dealing with is that your business needs are going to ebb and flow continuously. A fun story that I like to relate that we encountered when we were in our early days of Teams is we were working with a major our national home builder. And this home builder had this inventory of unused phone numbers that spanned a lot of different regions. And we asked them, why do you keep all of these unused phone numbers around? And the response we got back was, well, they were really difficult to acquire to begin with, and we don't know when we might need them again. So you need to pick a platform that's able to expand and contract with your business needs. So you don't have to keep a backlog of phone numbers, for example, in regions where you don't need them today. You just need to know that you can go acquire them tomorrow if your situation changes and you're expanding and need those. The other thing that comes to mind is the ability to be able to add and remove seats and to be able to scale your platform. You might be dealing with seasonality in your business where you need to deal with a cyclical trend where you're adding in new employees. And you need to have a platform that allows you to scale and to be able to do that easily. And also that has commercial arrangements that allow you to be able to deal with those costs and keep them consistent sort of across the year, as you're dealing with those cycles in your business. One other thing that comes to mind is also, future proofing
Yeah,
and
that's great. Thank you, Bill.
thinking about down the road where you're dealing with a situation where you're going to expand into other countries or other regions. So, so just thinking about those needs as well as you're dealing with flexibility.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. So, this next area of consideration is quality and reliability. And again, I think these are terms you've probably heard attached to UCaaS marketing speak and website language before. So, let's dive into what this really means. So, Lauren, when it comes to quality and reliability, what do IT leaders need to consider in a UCaaS platform?
Right. So, first of all, no platform is perfect. I know we all wish they were. And when they're not perfect, by the way, we get to read about it in the paper. So I think we're all pretty aware of when those things happen. And they're always sort of soul crushing for everybody involved. But the bottom line is actually they perform pretty well. So they're not perfect, but they do a really good job. We all strive for 5 nines, 6 nines, 100% uptime. The main thing I think when thinking about how to architect your UCaaS platform is to understand which of your numbers are really business critical and which ones are not. Because you need to have a backup strategy for if a system goes down for those business critical phone numbers. And so what does a backup strategy actually mean? I mean, if the platform's down, nobody's on that platform. So what it really means is, can you reroute those calls? Right? Can those calls be forwarded immediately or automatically? And sometimes, by the way, you want it to be automatic, and sometimes you don't want it to be automatic. You want it to be intentional. So you want both those options of being able to reroute a call in real time. And you might be rerouting that to an old PBX that you keep on standby. You might be rerouting that to people's cell phones. There's a lot of different options there, but you want to be able to do that in real time if for some reason the application itself goes down. The other thing to think about is, how do you find out if something's happened, right? A lot of quality is really about knowing when quality is not there. So how do you don't want to be finding out from your users that something's happened. You want notifications, you want alerts, you want things that proactively let you know the minute that your calling patterns and your usage patterns are outside of expected norms or go to zero altogether. So those are two main things I think that come to mind for me here.
Yeah, those are excellent things to consider. Thank you, Lauren. All right, let's move into our next area. So this is operational efficiency and flexibility. So different from the flexibility we spoke about earlier. And Bill, when we speak about operational flexibility and efficiency, why is this so important for IT leaders to consider?
Well, Nellie, the stat that's on the slide is a big indicator of that 40% of enterprise organizations use 17 or more different tools in their communication stack. I mean, that's a lot to consider when you have to integrate each of those into your customer experience. So, if you're looking for a simpler and more streamlined solution, that can help you to be able to focus your development costs and your development cycles on the things that actually improve your customer experience rather than the tasks that are necessary to keep all of these communication stack tools going. So looking for platforms that can deliver on feature requests, enable you to get new capabilities that are associated with your communications needs, that offer rich insights so that you can see how the stack is performing and operationalized for you. And the platforms that encourage the best integrations that are out on the market today for particular tasks rather than platforms that are only offering proprietary solutions. Like one example is Bandwidth's Maestro platform, in that we designed that to help enterprises be able to select best in breed technologies that fit into their customer experience so that they can leverage those through a network-based integration so that they can then focus their energies on the actual customer experience that they're building and leave all the technical complexities associated with the communications channel to the network platform to be able to handle those for them. That brings a lot of significant savings and simplification into operations while still allowing you to take advantage of the platforms that are best in breed and fit the needs that you need for your particular customer experience.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction. Thank you, Bill. All right. So we're going to move on to security and compliance now. And I know this is a huge area of consideration, not just in telecom, but just across your entire tech stack. So let's dive into this a little bit. So, Lauren, we know, especially in today's world, security and compliance are such crucial areas of consideration for any type of software purchase. And so, what could IT leaders consider that will help them feel confident that they are making the right choice of provider when it comes to protecting their security and also remaining compliant with regulatory requirements? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So this one came across fairly recently, and the timing was almost uncanny with regards to the timing of this webinar when this happened. But one of our customers recently had $100,000 worth of fraud in a single month because their PBX was hacked. This is an absolutely devastating thing for us. I mean, this is one of those things where we get that call. We are so incredibly sad for our customers and have such empathy for them because it is really a problem. What's interesting is that while we see this fairly often, the cloud platforms actually do a fairly decent job. They've got lots and lots of people out there really trying to make sure that these platforms are secure so that people don't face these problems. But no solution is perfect. And privacy is not something you can outsource to other people. So, making sure that you've got, a good legal team, a good data privacy team, a good security team on your team, making sure you've got good access controls, you've got good encryption, good fraud protections, and also, and this one gets overlooked a lot, making sure you regularly train for social engineering scams. Because at the end of the day, a lot of what happens because people inadvertently do things they didn't mean to do. They give out information that they didn't realize they were giving out, or they left a password on something, or there's a lot of different hosts, but being able to do the employee training is really important. So I think from a security point of view, these are some of the things that really, are things that we see on a regular basis. The regulatory side is something we live every single day. I mean, this is something that we have teams of people devoted to looking at and trying to help our customers solve. So when I was trying to think through the various things that we see most often, I would put them into a couple of categories. So first of all, emergency services in the US. This is particularly relevant when you're talking about choosing a UCaaS platform, because it is the UCaaS platform that is most likely to be making that emergency call. CCaaS platforms still have that obligation now too, which is a relatively new thing, but you've got to think about that. And guess what? None of the UCaaS platforms out there actually handle this the same way. So depending on which one you buy will depend on how this is going to work. So it's really important to kick the tires and make sure you understand the impact of that on your business. The second one is privacy. So things like GDPR, things like HIPAA in the US and various states that have privacy standards, making sure that when you're talking to a UCaaS provider, that their privacy policies are in line with your corporate privacy policies. It's very common and very expected to be able to ask this question of your providers and to be required to provide it. This is information that we share very willingly with our customers, and you should be asking the same thing of your UCaaS provider. The third one that is increasingly complex by the day is the know your customer KYC requirements for phone numbers globally. So fraud is an issue that I think every one of us has experienced. I mean, I don't know, every day on my phone, something, whether it's an email, a text, or a voicemail that I get from somebody who's not who they say they are. And what the industry is increasingly doing is cracking down, and none of this is the same from a country to a country to a country. So we spend a lot of time trying to stay on top of those. Again, not in place of anybody's regulatory and legal teams, but try to make sure that when you're getting a phone number from Bandwidth, it's really easy for you to do that. So it's not easy. It's getting harder by the day. It is something that's very important to consider, though.
Absolutely. And I think you make a really good point. This is a really great opportunity to, ahead of time, really involve your legal team, make sure that they're getting included in the purchase as well, and in the evaluation of different platforms as well. Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. That's super helpful. All right. So this next one is UX and adoption. And I think sometimes this is something we intuitively know, but it does get a little bit overlooked. However, the UX and the way that you are actually implementing a platform can really make a huge difference, especially when we do consider the 29% of enterprises we mentioned earlier who just end up switching to a new solution to solve for that exact same problem that they were trying to solve in the first place. So Lauren, I'm going to kick it back to you again. Why is it so important to consider the user experience when evaluating a UCaaS platform?
Yeah. So we all get demonstrations when somebody's trying to sell us something. But the great news about these UCaaS platforms is you can go get yourself a license and set yourself up really easily. So you don't need to get anybody on the phone. You can do it online. You can kick the tires, at least for some of the basic features. So it's really important to go do that, I think. I made a few notes to myself because I had so many questions and I knew I would forget a couple of them. So bear with me as I read through a little list, because what we are trying to do here is actually provide actionable content for you to be able to sort of ingest and use. But how easy is it to add and remove users and licenses? Is that really easy? Is it intuitive to get the phone numbers configured, to get them added to the account? The emergency services configuration, right? We've talked about this in the previous one on regulations. You got to make sure you know how that's going to work for your organization. Global coverage. How do you get the numbers you need and get them configured around the world? Do you need APIs, right? Because there are a lot of business systems, and increasingly you can do cool things like, build in the provisioning of a customer in your UC application and link that to something that you're doing in one of your business systems like ServiceNow or Salesforce or something else. So, cross-platform linking, do you need the ability to do that? And does the solution you're choosing have APIs? So these are just a few things that I wanted to make sure I had on the list for everybody to think about, because kicking the tires is really, really important. And then final thought on this is think about the way you're going to be using this app, because at the end of the day, it's an app, right? That most of your users are feeling, that's the way it feels to them. Are they going to be using it on their desktop? Are they going to be using it on an iPad? Are they going to be using it on their phone? These apps behave differently, and some of the features and functions that are available in one user experience are not necessarily available in another. So test it on an Android, test it on an Apple, test it on a couple of different operating systems, and make sure that everything you want to do is going to be working the way you think it's going to work across those multiple devices.
Thank you, Lauren. That's a really smart idea. I really love that. And again, I think this is something that we don't really think about in that testing or that demo phase. So thank you for those recommendations.
Yep.
All right. Well, last but certainly not least is service and support. And this is something that I know here at Bandwidth we are very proud of and we take very seriously. But again, it's something that I think almost every company out there is going to tout in one way or another. So, Bill, could you kind of take a moment to speak about what elements of customer service and support our IT leaders need to be aware of and ask questions about when they are evaluating UCaaS providers?
Sure, because one of the things that's almost inevitable is that issues are going to arise from time to time. And you're going to want the security and confidence of knowing that you have a team that you can lean on. A theme we see often, sort of building on what Lauren was sharing a few minutes ago, is that enterprise customers gravitate toward leveraging APIs in order to automate tasks into their back office systems. So APIs are critical for this, but it's not just about confirming whether or not the APIs exist. It's also about the documentation associated with those APIs. Is it easily accessible and easy to follow? Does it include code examples that make it easy to understand how to use these systems? But more importantly, when you get stuck and need to phone a friend, for example, does your UCaaS provide the opportunity to reach real humans with questions? I mean, maybe that's through support groups or user groups or chats, or maybe even through a voice phone call. But being able to get help when you need it is an important part of what you're going to have to deal with from a support perspective as you're trying to get these things up and running. So when we talk about having a team to lean on, it's a team that can include all of those various aspects of support. Different areas to pay close attention to are your service level agreements associated with various tasks. And it's not about just dealing with some type of service or support issue, but also about, these day-to-day mission critical issues that you might be dealing with, things like porting telephone numbers that you're going to use for new users, or things like dealing with software upgrades that are going to happen from time to time with both the software stack as well as maybe some of the devices that you have connected to the system. So you need to evaluate how accessible and available support resources will be for you in those scenarios. And consider, what type of support tiers the platform might offer and whether you might benefit from some type of upgraded support tier if you want to have extra support in those situations. Reporting and insights come to mind, like what level of information can you glean about how the platform is performing for you on your own, rather than having to deal with a support person to answer questions about different things. So being able to get reports that show you what numbers you have on a system, the services you have associated with those numbers, and the usage that you've got with those numbers are important pieces of that support question. And then one last area that sort of comes to mind, Nellie, is around the information you might be able to glean around case studies and reviews that other organizations similar to your own might have done on that particular platform, and consider how their use of the platform aligns with how your organization might be leveraging the platform. I mean, as we all know, good customer support is invaluable, and your peers will be able to vouch for the providers who are delivering on the promises that they're talking about around good service and support when issues arise and you need to get assistance.
Yeah, that's really great and so in depth. I mean, I think these are just all so many different areas that are not often considered, but can really make a huge difference when it comes to the longevity of the system that you choose. So thank you. All right. So thank you again, Lauren and Bill. So incredibly helpful, especially as we go through all these areas of consideration. But alongside that, we also wanted to take a moment to talk about the option of connectivity with Bring Your Own Carrier or BYOC, because oftentimes when we are making the transition either to a new or a different UCaaS provider, this is a big piece of that decision. And so, Lauren, could you take just a few moments to talk about the BYOC model and why it might be beneficial to enterprise organizations?
Sure, absolutely. This question comes up probably more than any other when you're thinking about the UCaaS solution that you're going to use. I kind of laughingly call it to be or not to be, right? To bring your own carrier, not to bring your own carrier. But over the years, as we've watched customers make this decision over and over again, The criteria really boil down to some fairly simple questions that you got to ask yourself. First of all, if you're not a large organization, or if you're an organization that does not have anything complicated about what you're trying to do with this platform, calling plans are awesome, right? They are simple, they're easy to use, they can be great. They just are simple, right? And so once you start to scale, and I think I saw a statistic that something like 70 or 80% of large enterprises, and don't quote me on that, are doing bring your own carrier when it comes to these platforms. There's some reasons why. So a couple of these reasons. First of all, complex call flows. So the minute you want to do something like put uh, an IVR in front of the UC application, or add in a payment processor, or add in some sort of AI voice bot of some sort in the process. The minute you want to do that and you're starting to orchestrate the call across multiple platforms, you really have to have a carrier or direct to carrier relationship to do that. So complex call flows, absolutely one of the biggest reasons. Number two, global coverage. This is getting better and better. You know, the carriers, I mean, the UC platforms are adding countries, but still there is not global coverage everywhere. And so if you have employees in a place where there's not calling plans, you're going to have to bring your own carrier. Once you do that, a lot of times it's just easier to just do that. And there's some reasons for that, especially economic, because the minute you start to say, okay, I've got a UCaaS platform, I've got a CCaaS platform, I've got minutes going over here, I've got calls going over there. If you aggregate all of that spend into a single provider, you can leverage the volume that you've got for some pretty significant volume discounts. So we do see that happening. And finally, support. So it gets back to what Bill was saying. Who are you going to call if you've got a problem? Who's going to have the expertise to help you really troubleshoot these calls, especially if the call flows are complicated. If the call's coming in, like a real life example, we have a call, it comes in to an IVR platform, and then that call at the same time goes out to get a user verification score, right? So it's a security score that you can be sure this person is who they say they are. And then in another situation, there's even a transfer out to a payment platform that then gets integrated into the call flow. So then the call can go from an agent to a payment platform, back to an agent. And then from there, calls can be referred out to stores. So if you think about, and I've put together a couple of different use cases here, but I just wanted to illustrate all the different paths that this call could take. And if you're trying to do that in a bring your own carrier way, it's just going to be an awful lot easier to do that if you've got a direct carrier relationship.
Yeah, that's super great. I'm glad you gave that example, because it hopefully at the on the consumer's end feels like a very seamless process, but we know on the back end it can get very complicated very quickly. And so yeah, having that direct carrier relationship, being able to streamline that a little bit, go beyond just what the calling plan has to offer, totally makes sense. So thank you. All right. Well, we have one last special consideration for everyone here. And this is, again, a topic that has been coming up a little bit more and more. So we did want to take the time to address it. But this is the topic of the great UCaaS and CCaaS convergence. And so, Bill, could you just speak to what this concept is and what we are seeing in the market when it comes to UCaaS and CCaaS platforms kind of coming together?
Sure. I mean, unified communications platforms and contact center platforms share a lot of common capabilities. And so providers who once used to be in one space or the other have now begun releasing new capabilities that can support both types of applications within one platform. You know, you even see this being dubbed as a multicast solution. So procuring UCaaS and CCaaS from the same vendor may offer you some big benefits, but it may also depend on your organization's appetite for risk and the degree of complexity of the call flows that make up your customer experience. So, you know, one of the things you'll need to determine is how much of each capability do you need? Like, or do you use equal amounts of UCaaS and CCaaS, or does one tend to shadow the other or overshadow the other as far as its use as a part of your customer experience. Oftentimes there are scenarios where customers may have to deprioritize their employee communications needs in order to take advantage of some things that they need particular for their CCaaS experience. And finding the platform that can blend those together well is what you need to consider. The minute you start to scale and grow, especially organizationally, those capabilities of employee communications in UCaaS start to be front and center. And those are things that you need to consider whether or not the multicast solution fits the needs that you have. Or perhaps you're dealing with scenarios where you're dealing with employees in different regions or different countries, where you may need to have tools that are more specialized for handling the needs that arise in those scenarios. In that case, a platform that has a focus on UCaaS may fit better. You're thinking about things like dealing with dialing plans in different geographies, or being able to acquire and manage phone numbers from lots of different countries within the single platform, and acquiring the tools that are needed to track the call experiences that go along with those. So there's a lot of good possibilities and options out there, but just think through sort of the needs of your organization and how you're going to be growing forward to see whether or not a platform that does both is really the right fit for you, or if you'd be better off using something that was more customized for one or the other.
That's great information. And I think that's something, again, we're starting to see this more and more, but it may not have been a consideration that was on a lot of people's radars. So thank you for taking the time to kind of step us through that.
Sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, that was a wealth of information. Thank you again, Lauren and Bill. I just want to take a moment just to recap everything that we've touched on so far today. First and foremost is just to really take your time and do your due diligence when choosing between UCaaS vendors. Again, we don't want folks to fall into that buyer's remorse. And there's obviously can be a lot of outside pressures to quickly choose a platform to go ahead and get implemented, move on with your business goals. But I think what we learned today is there really is a lot to consider, and really taking that time and looking at everything from a 360 lens can really help you make the right decision. And a piece of that is really striving for that high level or that high value fit using those 6 key areas of consideration that we present earlier today. And also consider the benefits of calling plans versus BYOC, and which one is really going to best fit your enterprise as you start to grow and scale in the future. And then finally, just considering those benefits that Bill was just speaking about regarding receiving your UCaaS and your CCaaS from either separate or the same vendor. All right. So I want to go ahead and move into our Q&A. It does look like we have a couple questions. And as a reminder, as we're still answering questions today, please feel free to leave a question in our Q&A box. It should be to the right of your screen. So the first question I have, so before you start the process of selecting a UCaaS vendor, how do you determine if your organization is ready for the switch? Bill or Lauren, do either of you want to take that one?
I can jump on this one. So we've worked with a lot of people. We have a pre-migration checklist that I believe is even in some of our content on our website. But some things that you need to consider is you need to divide everybody up into cohorts, right? You're obviously not going to spend, the larger the organization, we have customers who are migrating 100, 200,000 employees. This is a lot of people. So you got to divide it up. You can divide it up by organization or geography. Usually you want to do some let the IT department go first to see what the experience is going to let everybody be for everybody else, right? You don't want to do your executive team first. We had that happen once, and that was not good for one of our customers. So I think that's really important. I think having a champion in each of those cohorts, because there's a lot of training that has to go on with a new platform. Fortunately, they're all getting more and more intuitive and they have similar features, but you still want to give your employees the opportunity to have at least some basic training on whatever it is that you're going to be offering them that's new. So having a champion in each department we see really helps people. So they can help to offload some of that training and also some of those questions that are inevitably going to come back. Because the minute you do this, you're going to get flooded with questions. And so having a first line of defense before they all come to you has been really, really helpful. So that's an important one. Being able to go forward and go back. So this is really important.
Good
So
one.
another fun story, because this one was actually true. One of my very first customers that I had when we were rolling out our initial Microsoft Teams offerings. So the executive team had been migrated over. They'd all been trained, but one person was on vacation. So they got back from vacation. They were like, kind of like, what the heck is happening here? No, I'm not ready. So they needed to be able to move them back to the old platform and let that, give them time to go back and retrain, et cetera. Well, you have to be very careful about how you think about your migration plan if you're going to do that. So you never want to, if you can, you always want to make sure that your numbers can live in an environment where you're not having to do these big carrier ports in conjunction with the migration. You want to get all of the numbers in a place where all you're changing is the routing back and forth between these platforms. And if you do that, it is super easy to simply go in and in real time configure, oh, I'm routing here. I make a quick change in the dashboard. I'm immediately routing someplace else. So I think those are some things that I have seen really be successful and some pitfalls that I've seen people have in this migration journey.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Let's see. We have another question here. It says, do you find that customers have an easier or harder time with some platforms over others? I think you want to take that one.
I get this question a lot. Oh, you got it, Bill? Okay.
Either way, I mean, I was just thinking, a lot of times from our perspective, we hear things like that, but, we don't, advocate for one platform over another. All of these platforms have, capabilities that work really well in some cases. Some of them have some challenges in other cases. We leave it up to our customers to figure that out. The thing that plays into that a lot of times, though, is the planning that you put into it. And sort of building on some of the things Lauren just suggested, is the planning that you put into learning about the different capabilities and how you can really leverage them will play into your opinions of those platforms and how well they fit for you. Sometimes a platform may be able to do something that you're not aware of, or sometimes the user experience might not be what you were expecting. So, so we encourage you to look at all platforms that are out there and to really understand what their capabilities are. And then from there, you can make an informed decisions about which one works best for you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. All right. I think I'm seeing one last question. How do you see AI influencing the choice of a UCaaS platform?
I can take a stab at that one too, if you want, Lauren. AI comes into play oftentimes in some of the back-end tools that the platforms tie in. And honestly, you probably see more of that in the CCaaS space than the UCaaS space, but certainly they do apply in the UCaaS space, around tools that are related to meetings, the ability to connect into meetings and to get transcriptions and notes and some of the great capabilities that AI is bringing there. Oftentimes, those are integrated into the back end functions of that platform. So again, just really understand not only what the capabilities are, but how easy is it for your employees to tap into those? What are the commercial arrangements around those? How available, or is it something you can make available to everyone, or is it something that might only apply to certain departments? But there are, there's lots of AI tools that start to tie into those back end functions, around how your UCaaS is connected into meetings and other types of daily functions that your employees end up doing every day.
My favorite is meeting summaries and email summaries.
Right.
Especially my email inbox, which is unmanageable on most days. I just literally ask for a summary. I'm like, oh, that was awesome. Saves me so much time. So yeah, I think we're starting to see it come in the various, in the edges where all of these different platforms, have different our capabilities. So you see it in the meeting summaries, you see it in the email summaries, all of the different applications. There's even some tools that'll create spreadsheet templates. Those haven't worked quite as well for me yet, but I'm super psyched to see the next generation of those, because I think that's going to be really cool too.
Awesome. All right. I'm not seeing any other Q&A questions. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. And I want to give a big thanks to our speakers, Lauren and Bill. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. Again, I know this is something that you both live and breathe every single day here at Bandwidth. And so we were just really excited to share their expertise with everyone who joined us today. So thank you again, Lauren and Bill. And I would love to invite all of you to download our UCaaS buying guide. We have included all the information that you heard here today, those 6 key areas of consideration, plus a lot more information and resources that are really, again, meant to help you feel confident and competent when making this choice in your buying journey. So the QR code is available right here for you to be able to download. And I do want to thank you, say a thank you to our audience for joining us on another Bandwidth webinar today. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. And again, you will receive a recording of today's webinar, so just be on the lookout for that. All right, but thank you everyone so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.